She'll tell the world she's fine, but the quiet you left behind will be the thing that never lets her sleep. She'll smile in photos and caption her freedom like a victory. She'll move through nights with laughter that sounds practiced. The noise becomes her armor. Parties, new faces, frantic texting, all distractions stitched together to cover the hollowness. For a while the act holds. For a while she believes the story she sells. But when the music dies and the lights go down, the silence you gave her returns like a room with a missing wall. You weren't flashy. You didn't perform. You gave steadiness instead of spectacle. You gave presence instead of promises. That piece isn't a highlight reel. It's slow and ordinary. It fits into daily life and stabilizes it. She confused that steadiness for boredom because the world trains her to chase sparks. She chose the sparks and celebrated the flash. At first she feels relieved. The breakup feels like liberation. Her friends validate the exit. They cheer and frame it as her getting what she deserves. She nods, posts another photo, smiles wider. The applause is bright. But external applause is shallow currency. It can't buy the quiet confidence you offered. The relief thins. She'll try new lovers as if trying on clothes to see which fabric sticks. Some are loud, some are expensive, some are charming in ways you never needed to be. They fill nights and empty mornings. The novelty burns fast. After the rush comes recognition. None of them know how to be still with her the way you were. None know the small steady acts that anchor life. Memory is patient. It waits in corners. It shows up when she hears a song you once hummed. It hits when a quiet evening arrives and there is no one to share it with. She scrolls through old messages and feels a sudden regret that has nothing to do with shame and everything to do with loss. It isn't that you were flawless. You were not. But you were reliable, present in a way that became home. She will rewrite the story. She will say the breakup was right. She will craft explanations that keep pride intact. But explanations don't erase absence. They only dress sorrow in language. Small things betray the pretense. A deeper silence in a group photo, the way her laughter cuts off, the restless energy that arrives without warning. Your absence becomes the standard she measures strangers by. She notices how quickly others talk, how often they demand attention, how seldom they offer calm. She starts to compare and finds those comparisons empty. Attention dazzles then drains. Connection sustains. That lesson lands slowly and without mercy. One quiet night she will feel the truth like a physical ache. It will come without fanfare. No dramatic revelation. No cinematic reunion. Just a long awareness that what she lost is not easily replaced. And that awareness will be louder than the posts, louder than the applause, louder than any story she tells herself. She will find herself replaying ordinary moments and wondering why ordinary felt impossible to choose now. She tries to look healed. She dresses it up, filters it, and feeds it to the world like proof of strength. Every post, every smile, every "I'm better now" is rehearsed. She's not healing, she's performing recovery. The difference is quiet, but it's there. Healing is done in silence. Performing is done for validation. And right now, she needs the world to believe she's over you more than she actually is. She fills her time with noise, brunches, parties, meaningless dates. Every hour she's surrounded by people, but none of them reach her. They talk, they laugh, they flirt, but none of it lands. The connection feels hollow because distraction can't replace meaning. She doesn't realize she's using people as painkillers. Every new face becomes an attempt to erase yours. But pain doesn't disappear that easily. It hides until the noise fades. When she's alone, the truth creeps in. Her phone goes silent, the room feels heavy, and that's when it hits her. The quiet hurts. She built her days around proving she's fine, but her nights remind her she's not. Healing doesn't happen through motion, it happens through stillness. But stillness is what she avoids the most because it holds too much truth. She'll do anything to not sit with herself. She keeps scrolling, keeps posting, keeps showing everyone she's moved on. The illusion comforts her ego. It keeps her from facing the raw ache underneath. The more she performs, the less she feels. But emotion ignored becomes emotion stored. It builds up, quietly, behind every laugh that doesn't reach her eyes. And one night, all that suppressed energy will break through. It always does. Every man she entertains after you feels like a mirror she doesn't want to look into. They show her how empty surface-level attention really is. The flirting, the compliments, the games, they used to excite her. Now they drain her. Because once she's felt the depth of real connection, the shallow stuff doesn't fill her anymore. It only reminds her how much she lost. Her friends think she's thriving. They tell her she looks happier, freer, more alive. She nods and lets them believe it. It's easier than admitting she's still haunted. She keeps the truth locked inside, that no one's made her feel the same since you left. The peace she once took for granted now feels like a craving she can't satisfy. She misses being understood without explanation. The irony is brutal. The more she chases distractions, the more your absence stands out. The louder her life becomes, the quieter her heart feels. She thought freedom would fix her, but freedom without grounding just feels like drifting. Every attempt to escape herself pulls her further into the emptiness she's running from. Eventually, the performance loses power. The crowd gets bored. The likes slow down. The thrill of pretending fades. And when the mask slips, all that's left is her reflection, raw, unguarded, and alone. That's when she'll realize healing doesn't happen when you prove you've moved on. It happens when you stop pretending you already have. She mistook your calm for indifference. She thought peace was boredom. You didn't chase, you didn't argue, you didn't feed drama, and that quiet strength confused her. She wanted energy, reaction, chaos disguised as passion. You offered stability, and stability doesn't shout. It moves slowly. It builds trust instead of tension. But to someone addicted to emotional highs, calm feels like emptiness. You didn't compete for control, you simply stayed centered. That unnerved her because she couldn't manipulate your focus. You were present, grounded, and consistent, 3 things she didn't realize were rare. She thought she wanted excitement, but excitement is just anxiety with better lighting. It gives her adrenaline, not peace. You gave her peace and she didn't know how to handle it. She confused your restraint for lack of care. She thought silence meant weakness when it was really strength. You didn't react to her moods because you understood something she didn't. Reacting gives away power. You stayed in control, and that control made her restless. When a woman doesn't understand calm energy, she starts to create chaos to feel alive again. She'll poke at your patience, test your limits, just to feel the emotional rush she mistakes for love. She didn't realize your peace was rare until she lost it. The world outside you is noisy. Men compete for attention. They overshare, overpromise, and overcompensate. They chase validation instead of purpose. And after a while, she notices it. She sees how rare it is for someone to be comfortable in silence. You were her calm in a storm she didn't know she created. At first she calls it dull. Later she calls it irreplaceable. Because nothing compares to the kind of presence that doesn't demand, doesn't perform, doesn't fold. That kind of presence makes her feel safe in a way she couldn't explain. You were the anchor she thought was a cage. So she walked away, chasing movement, thinking it meant freedom. But freedom without grounding is just falling without direction. Now she sits with the men she once thought she wanted, loud, reactive, constantly proving themselves. Feels exciting for a week, maybe 2. Then it becomes exhausting. Every argument drains her, every small fight feels familiar. She starts to crave that old peace she once criticized. The calm you brought wasn't boring, it was balance. She had to lose it to understand that difference. You weren't trying to impress her, you were just being. And that scared her because real peace forces reflection. Around you she couldn't hide behind emotional games. Your silence made her confront herself, and most people run from that. Now she's surrounded by noise again, and it's suffocating. The truth hits quietly. You were never dull, you were composed. You weren't passive, you were disciplined. She wasn't bored, she was unready. What she called too calm was actually emotional maturity. And when she finally learns what peace feels like after chaos, she'll understand the difference. But by then you'll be too far gone to return to. She doesn't heal, she distracts. She jumps from one thrill to the next, hoping something will drown out the ache. Rebounds become medicine for the ego, not the heart. Each new man is a temporary escape, a quick high that fades by morning. She confuses attention for connection, lust for closeness, validation for love. And every time it ends, she's emptier than before. At first, it feels like freedom. New faces, new conversations, new excitement. She thinks she's proving something, that she can move on fast, that she doesn't need anyone. But every new start feels strangely familiar because the pattern never changes. It's the same cycle with different names. The same type of energy disguised in a different body. The same disappointment waiting on the other side of her rush. She tries to silence the void with movement. The more she runs, the louder it gets. The rebound laughs, the drinks, the nights out, they all blur together. None of it sticks. None of it feels real. She starts to realize she isn't connecting with anyone. She's just trying to forget someone. But forgetting isn't healing. It's avoidance dressed as progress. You gave her stability. These men give her stimulation. But stimulation fades fast. It's all surface, no soul. They flirt but don't listen. They touch but don't feel. They want her body but can't handle her silence. And she starts to remember the difference between being desired and being understood. One flatters the ego, the other feeds the spirit. Only one of those lasts. The rebound always begins strong. He says the right things, brings new energy, makes her feel seen for a while. Then reality slips in. The effort drops. The excitement cools. The charm wears thin. Suddenly she's back in the same place, alone with a man who can't meet her on a deeper level. And that's when she realizes she's chasing the same emptiness she once blamed you for. Each failed attempt forces a little more reflection. She starts comparing without meaning to. The way you listened. The way you stayed composed. The way your calm never felt forced. These new men are louder, flashier, but hollow. Their energy burns out too fast. None of them carry the weight of silence like you did. That's when regret creeps in, not in dramatic scenes but in quiet reminders. She thought letting you go would open her world. Instead it shrank it. The dating scene feels like an echo chamber of shallowness. Everyone performing, no one connecting. She realizes how rare it was to feel safe with someone who didn't need to prove anything. You didn't sell an image, you lived in truth. She didn't see that until she surrounded herself with men addicted to pretending. The rebounds don't heal her, they expose her. They show her what she lost, what she overlooked, what she'll never easily find again. Every new attempt reminds her she traded substance for spectacle. And now, every thrill feels temporary because deep down she knows, none of them are you. You were the mirror she stopped recognizing. With you nearby she became softer, steadier, less performative. When you left, that reflection fractured. She could still see herself, but the image was warped by noise and impulse. The woman who used to show up around you felt unfamiliar. You made being vulnerable safe. Confessions weren't weaponized. Mistakes didn't explode into punishment. That permission to be honest lowered the walls she habitually carried. Once the mirror went dark, exposing the tremor in her voice felt dangerous again. She learned to hide, to rehearse, to laugh where she once would have spoken. You reflected her without spectacle. You showed calm and expected the same. That quiet accountability reshaped small choices. In your presence she tempered impulses, picked steadier options, and managed herself by a private standard only you supplied. Without that steady gauge, reckless moments multiply and seem easier to justify. The absence made everyday things louder. Private jokes lost their anchors. Ordinary evenings felt exposed. Habits that had been harmless in your company turned sharp without your balancing influence. She noticed the gap in tiny ways. A flash of shame after a careless comment, a sleepless night for no obvious reason, or a sudden longing when a song reminded her of quiet company. Friends keep company but can't offer the same mirror. They bring laughter and counsel, but they don't correct the small misalignments that only consistent presence catches. The tone that slides into sarcasm, the knee-jerk defensiveness, the way she over-explains. Those adjustments used to happen naturally with you. Now they need intention, and intention takes work. She used to find rest in ordinary moments with you. The safety you provided wasn't flashy, it was a background steadying force. Losing it meant she had to invent safety for herself. She tries books, therapy, late-night reflection. Those help, but they're tools, not the quiet gravitational field you created by simply being. Building internal calm from scratch is slow and brutal. She isn't mourning perfection. She mourns accuracy. You reflected who she could be in a way that was honest, not flattering. That reflection did more than reassure, it corrected course. Without it, she accumulates small regrets instead of guided corrections. Those regrets teach lessons, but the tuition is harsh. Sometimes she searches for you in others, in a patient listener, in a man who doesn't overreact, in someone who holds still when she's loud. Copies show their seams. They offer gestures, not steadiness. She begins to understand the mirror wasn't about you fixing her. It was about a space where repair felt possible and natural. Gradually she relearns herself. The recovery is built on different foundations: discipline, quiet work, deliberate practice. It's not as effortless as being reflected by someone who held a steady frame, but it produces a sturdier self. Still, the memory of the mirror lingers, a quiet ache that informs the way she now chooses. It's a lesson disguised as loss. Some shapes of safety can't be replicated, only grown into. That lingering absence becomes a compass. It guides her choices even when she thinks she's moved on, steering her towards steadiness and quiet integrity in living. She tested your patience because that's how she measured love. Every cold response, every withdrawal, every silence, all of it was a question in disguise. She wanted to know if you'd bend, if you'd chase, if your composure would crack under her storm. You didn't. And that confused her more than anything. Most men respond to pressure with emotion. You didn't flinch. That calm rattled her. At first, she thought your stillness meant detachment. She assumed silence equaled indifference. But it wasn't distance, it was control. You refused to react because you understood the trap. The moment you start explaining your worth, you lose power. The moment you try to prove your care, you stop being respected. So you stayed silent. You let her project, assume, and spin stories that had nothing to do with the truth. That silence became your shield. She didn't know that testing a grounded man only exposes instability. You saw through the chaos and didn't take the bait. That's the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional immaturity. One responds with reason, the other with impulse. You chose peace over proof. And that choice unsettled her because she realized she couldn't control you. She could influence your time, maybe your attention, but never your center. The game lost power the moment you stopped playing. The more she tried to provoke a reaction, the calmer you became. The more she pulled away, the less you chased. She expected drama, she got discipline. That's what flipped the script. You didn't match her emotion. You absorbed it without giving her validation. That's when the testing stopped feeling like control and started feeling like exposure. She wasn't evaluating you anymore, she was confronting herself. When you didn't chase, she had to face her own emptiness. Every unanswered message, every moment of silence echoed her insecurity back at her. You became the mirror she couldn't manipulate. She started to realize your restraint wasn't cruelty, it was strength. It was the kind of restraint that only men with self-respect possess. You didn't need to prove love through reaction. You proved it through boundaries. She'll replay those moments differently now. The times she accused you of not caring, she'll remember how calm you stayed. The nights she pushed you to argue, she'll recall how you refused to stoop. It'll dawn on her that you weren't cold, you were composed. And that composure was exactly what made you valuable. She mistook patience for disinterest because she wasn't used to men with emotional discipline. Tests always reveal truth. Hers showed you her immaturity and showed her your strength. When she pushed and you didn't break, she met her limit. That's when the lesson began. She learned that control isn't power, emotional balance is. And once you walked away, that truth hit her in silence. You didn't have to teach it with words. Your lack of reaction became the loudest message of all. She finally understood. Silence from a man who once cared is not indifference, it's a verdict. Her indifference became a quiet law she couldn't break. She tests the edges of it, a like that lingers, a comment deleted, a message left unread, and every time the boundary holds, it chips away at her certainty. She hoped for a crack, a sign you'd crumble, anything to prove she still mattered. Instead she met restraint, measured steps, and an unbothered posture that said more than words ever could. At first she believed you'd react. She imagined fury, pleading, spectacle. That's the script she knew. But when nothing dramatic happened, she found herself exposed. Your lack of chase felt like a verdict. It made reconciliation into a transaction that couldn't be bargained for. Without the drama, she had nowhere to hide. The pull of not being needed is a strange loneliness. She had been used to being at the center of your orbit. Suddenly she discovered the orbit had shifted and she had to reorient. She feared being replaceable because you chose calm over chaos. She begins to study your life from the margins. She watches your progress in passive ways. A new routine, a changed rhythm, accomplishments that require no explanation. Those quiet changes sting because they prove something she refused to accept. You are building without her permission. That autonomy becomes a mirror for her failures. Every attempt at contact becomes a test of your commitment to not return. She looks for signs of softness, and when she finds none, the realization sinks deeper. The absence of response is not apathy, it's self-respect. The space you keep is a boundary she can't cross by charm or guilt. That boundary becomes its own kind of power and it rewrites her expectations. There's humiliation in wanting someone who won't want you back. It's a slow erosion of ego. She tries sympathy from friends and nods from family, but those comforts are small consolation. The internal ache remains. The truth of being unwanted by someone you once relied on is corrosive. Her strategy shifts. Instead of dramatic contact, she sends small signals. A like, a saved story, a casual mention in conversation. Each micro-move is a calibration, an experiment to see if gravity has returned. When nothing sticks, the pattern of her behavior becomes quieter and more desperate. It's not about spite, it's about reclaiming a place she believed was hers. As she watches your steady progress, frustration turns to introspection. The indifference that once enraged her now forces accountability. She starts asking the difficult questions about herself instead of projecting them onto you. That's the bitter fruit of your restraint. It compels self-examination because it refuses to validate avoidance. In the end, the hardest lesson is learning that absence can be a teacher rather than a wound. Your lack of reaction taught a boundary she couldn't force. It exposed a lack of capacity she had to acknowledge. And though that truth hurts, it is the kind of wound that instructs. Indifference, wielded with dignity, becomes a curriculum she didn't choose but must study if she hopes to truly change. Over time she either grows into that lesson or carries it as a quiet, unending regret. Every man after you feels like a comparison she can't escape. She tries to pretend they're different, that she's moved on, that she's found something new, but the truth hides in her silence. None of them measure up. None of them make her feel the way you did without even trying. They say the right words, give her attention, make her laugh for a moment, but it's hollow. It fades as soon as the noise stops. You became the quiet standard she didn't know she was creating. Every gesture, every tone, every reaction is held up to the memory of you. When a man gets too loud, she remembers your calm. When someone overpromises, she remembers your consistency. When they talk too much about themselves, she remembers how you listened. It's not that she wants to remember you, it's that she can't help it. The contrast exposes what's missing. You didn't leave a wound, you left a benchmark. That's worse because a wound can heal. A standard stays. It follows her everywhere. The way you carried yourself, the control in your silence, the certainty in your energy, those things haunt her because they remind her of balance. She learned too late that comfort isn't exciting at first glance. It's quiet. It's subtle. It grows roots instead of fireworks. Now she meets men who flash charm but lack depth. They flirt with words that sound rehearsed. They chase validation like oxygen. At first, it feels flattering, until it feels fake. She starts to recognize the difference between being wanted and being valued. With you, she was seen. With them, she's a distraction. The more she notices it, the less she can pretend she's fine. You're no longer there, yet you exist in every comparison. Every conversation she has now carries a quiet reminder of what you represented. They touch her hand, but it doesn't feel the same. They talk about their ambitions, but the words sound weightless. You set a tone they can't imitate because it wasn't performance, it was presence. You didn't need validation to feel powerful. That's what made you unforgettable. She used to crave attention. Now attention irritates her. The endless talking, the constant need for reassurance, it all feels childish. You gave her stability through your restraint. You taught her without saying a word that real masculinity isn't loud. It's composed. It's focused. It doesn't chase what doesn't value it. That lesson follows her every time someone tries too hard. She tries to convince herself that what you had was temporary. But if it were, it wouldn't echo this long. Real connections don't fade, they imprint. And your imprint isn't emotional, it's psychological. It lives in her expectations, in her definition of what strength looks like, in her sense of safety. That's the price of meeting a man who doesn't need to prove his worth. You can't forget him. You can't replace him. Every new connection reminds her of that unspoken truth. Once she's felt peace in a man's presence, chaos becomes unbearable. And once she's seen what emotional control looks like, she can never fully respect anything less. Silence became your sharpest weapon. You didn't beg, you didn't argue, you didn't try to prove your worth. You vanished with purpose. That's when she realized what she'd lost wasn't just a man, but the calm she used to take for granted. Your absence wasn't empty, it was charged. It carried a message her mind kept replaying. You weren't waiting anymore. At first, she told herself it didn't matter. She convinced her friends you were replaceable. But silence has a way of unraveling lies. Every time she scrolled through your name and found nothing new, the void deepened. The quiet became heavy. It wasn't indifference, it was control. You weren't ignoring her, you were prioritizing yourself. And that subtle difference tore through her ego like truth always does. She didn't expect that your stillness would echo louder than any apology. She expected closure, reaction, maybe even anger. Instead, she met peace, and that peace humiliated her chaos. You didn't chase, didn't explain, didn't correct the narrative. You simply detached. And in doing so, you exposed how addicted she had been to your attention. Every attempt she makes to move on feels artificial now. The men who come after you feel temporary. They talk too much, demand too quickly, and feel too small. She misses the space you gave her, even when she didn't deserve it. She misses the comfort of knowing your silence wasn't punishment, it was discipline. You weren't trying to win her back. You were protecting your energy. That's the part she can't replicate, your self-control. The more she realizes how hard it is to find, the more she understands what she destroyed. You didn't lose her, she lost access to something rare. You embodied the strength she pretended to admire until it turned against her illusions. She once thought your distance was coldness. Now she sees it was mastery. While she reacted, you refined. While she spoke, you built. While she searched for validation, you found clarity. That difference is what separates men who heal from men who chase. You became the proof that walking away isn't weakness, it's evolution. She looks at your silence now as a mirror, not a rejection. It reflects her mistakes back at her. The more time passes, the more she understands the message you never said out loud. Real men don't announce they're done, they simply move on. That realization cuts deeper than any argument. It forces her to face her own reflection without the cushion of your understanding. You were her safety net, now you're her lesson. And that lesson keeps replaying every time she meets a man who talks about power but can't control his emotions. Your silence became her closure. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, it was final. And though she'll never admit it out loud, that quiet end taught her more than your words ever could. You didn't punish her, you evolved past her. You became untouchable, not because you changed who you were, but because you finally remembered what you're worth. Time exposed what emotions tried to hide. She thought your silence would fade, that eventually you'd reach out, that your absence was temporary. But instead of returning, you adapted. You grew sharper, calmer, more composed. The man she remembers no longer exists. The version that used to bend for love now stands unshakable. You stopped trying to prove your value and started living it. That shift became irreversible. She sees it now, not through your words but through your energy. The subtle distance, the quiet self-assurance, the refusal to be affected by her presence. You moved beyond needing to be understood. You became a man who lets results do the talking. And nothing unsettles her more than realizing you no longer need her validation to feel significant. Every time she checks your life, she's met with stability. The peace you wear now is intimidating because it exposes how chaotic she still is. You built discipline where she expected desperation. You built control where she hoped for cracks. She wanted to see emotion, you gave her growth. That's the moment she understood. You didn't wait to heal, you built yourself while she watched from the sidelines. The strength you carry now is quiet but undeniable. You don't chase anymore because you know your worth isn't in being chosen. It's in choosing yourself. You no longer react to the same triggers. The things that once pulled you into emotional chaos now feel beneath you. You don't need to prove calm, you are calm. That difference is power. She remembers when she could influence you with silence or attention. Now neither works. You've learned how to operate in emotional neutrality. You're untouchable because you've detached with understanding, not bitterness. That's a kind of strength most never reach. The kind that doesn't seek revenge, only peace. While she tries to recreate what you had with someone else, you're already ahead. You're building, improving, expanding. Your silence turned into transformation. What started as pain became purpose. You no longer think about what you lost. You think about what you gained through letting go. The man who once doubted himself now radiates certainty. That shift didn't come from her return. It came from your refusal to regress. She'll always feel that contrast between the man she remembers and the man you've become. It's what keeps her curiosity alive, but her access gone. You've rewritten the narrative. The story no longer centers around heartbreak. It centers around evolution. The power she once had over you dissolved the moment you stopped needing closure. Now your silence speaks for you. It says you've outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated uncertainty. It says you've learned to love distance because it protects your peace. It says you've mastered the art of detachment without losing compassion. That's what real growth looks like, not loud, not bitter, just complete. You didn't move on to prove anything. You moved on because staying small no longer fit who you became. That's your victory, quiet, disciplined, permanent. And whether she admits it or not, she'll always remember you as the man who found power in letting go.